Hello, welcome to Beyond Me podcast, where we discuss about disability by bringing and understanding the different and being the aspiration and breaking the barriers to the disability community. I am your host, Sheilah Opio. I'm the host. Today, we learn about autistic awareness with my guest, the Deputy Director of the Research and Compliance at the National Commission of Kenya. I would like to welcome you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So, good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Felicia Mburu. I am the Deputy Director of Research and Compliance at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I am also a lawyer by practice, and I am a woman with disability.
Amazing. Nice. So today we are going to learn it's inside and outside of the disability awareness and autism awareness. I'm so amazed and I'm so excited. But remember also to follow us on our social media platform, subscribe, and also watch us on YouTube. As we continue, I would like to ask you, Felicia, can you tell us what is autism means to you?
So, the beauty about what autism means to me is it's a sensory processing condition, which basically means our brains operate differently. Unfortunately, the common misconception around autism in Kenya is that a person with autism has low intellect, has mental issues, and also is considered to be, for lack of a better word, mwenda wazimu. But there's a very big misunderstanding on what autism is. Autism is simply a sensory processing condition. So our senses communicate differently with our brain. So to use the example of a keyboard, and this is what I love using all the time, a keyboard and a computer. The keyboard is your senses, which is the sense of touch, sight, taste, skin, hearing, and therefore that makes your keyboard. And then the brain is your central processing unit within the computer. So autism is basically your senses. The wiring for your keyboard and your CPU are most likely miswired. So you might find, for instance, the wiring to your eyesight is linked to your ears and such like situations. So that's the simplest way to explain autism. It is an issue of sensory processing. Well, there are some people who might also have other related disabilities within the spectrum. The reason why we call it a spectrum. You might find some people who have intellectual disability in addition to autism. You might find some people who have physical disabilities in addition to autism. And deafness is also very common amongst the autistic community. But what we need people to understand is that autism as a standalone issue is all about sensory processing.
That is, I've also learned, I've seen something new I didn't know before.
Yeah.
Nice to know. Now, does this autism impact your life? How does it impact your life?
Wow, that's a big question. Autism impacts my life in so many ways because remember, it's about senses and how we communicate. For instance, most people are aware the thing about autistics is visual. One of the things they say is that we have very poor eye contact. And how does this impact our lives? Because you can either be on the hyper side or on the hypo side where you don't feel it. And that's why we call it a spectrum. And one of the things we always tell people is remember, autism is a spectrum. And if you meet one autistic, you've only met one. You don't assume that you have met, that whatever you put in place for me will apply to other autistics. Because how it affects me will be very different from how it affects other people on the autism spectrum. Like, for instance, the sense of light. if you're on the hyper side of visual autism, these are the people who you'll find tend to have seizures when there's too much bright light in the room. And therefore, flashing cameras, flashing lights will automatically give this person a seizure, impacting them on the spot. But we see when the lighting is not too bright, where there are no flashing lights, this person can live a normal, ordinary life without interference. So autism, it's very strange. You can't put a blanket over it. It's just to understand the autistic person that is standing in front of you and how their brain operates so that you can be able to understand the impact on their lives and how to provide them with supports accordingly. And on top of that, sorry to add this a little bit more, not everyone needs supports. Not every autistic person needs support. There are those ones who, like me, we live independently, we have a good life, we don't need much support unless, of course, we have a relapse episode. And then there are those ones who are very far off on the spectrum who might need daily supports on how to live independently. The goal here, always remember, is not about fixing or curing the person. It is how do we get the person to live independently.
That is good to know.
Yes.
That is a very impactful learning. Let me ask you, what are the strengths and maybe challenges that being a person of autism are facing on daily basis?
The dangerous side of being a person on the spectrum is the stereotypes. Our biggest barrier is actually attitudinal barrier. When you look on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the convention does not define disability intentionally, because disability is not what I have as my diagnosis or as my condition or whatever medical situation you give me. Disability is how society responds to me as a person. Now, this is the only part when it comes to autism. It's always, this is where sometimes I feel jealous of people with visible disabilities, like wheelchair users, because it is clear you're a person with disability and the supports are known. But when it comes to autism, which is invisible, and sometimes am very good at masking and pretending to be a normal human being without a disability, people then assume that you're not a person with disability. And that is where our biggest barrier and challenge is the stereotypes about what autism is supposed to be versus what it actually is. Society assumes that just because my brain functions a different way, that therefore I'm a crazy person. And especially if for those of us on the spectrum who are nonverbal, we don't talk. Nonverbal does not mean non-communicative. We have different ways of communicating, including sign language, which is still a method of communicating. So, but again, it still always comes back to the idea of what is autism for me as a person with autism and for the society of what they think autism is. That is our biggest barrier. And for that reason, you end up finding we lack access to services. Because again, remember, our disability is invisible and it's dependent on the environment. It always comes back down to the environment. So if I'm put in an environment where it triggers my autism, then automatically my autism will show, and then the society treats me a particular way, including denying me services, calling the police, saying that, oh, this is a violent person, a very aggressive human being. Yet the problem here is the environment. Versus if you put me in a normal, organized environment that supports my autism needs, I will be like a regular person. But then the society says, oh, this person is pretending to be disabled. And yet you find that the difference here was just the environment that I was put in. And that's the biggest challenge. It always comes back down to the attitude of the society. And secondly, the environment that you put a person with autism in.
Wow. This is very inspiring. I like how you're explaining that. That is very impactful and also helpful and help us to know how we can accommodate a person with disability. Now, for the last probably question, can you explain to us how how people can learn more about autism. How what are the autistic experience?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, first of all, shout out to all my autism siblings who helped me with this situation. Because the thing about autism is, remember, it is a spectrum and it is so diverse. How it presents in a person is as unique as your DNA. And remember, while there is no known cause for autism, and I would love to stress that some more, there is no known cause for autism. There are situations that have been identified that can make autism worse or better. So how do we get to learn more about autism? Rule number one, learn from the person. Every autistic is individual and unique, and autism will affect me very differently from how it affects another person. And for this reason, the best teacher to teach you about autism is actually the person themselves. So if you know an autistic in your life, say hi to them, get to know them on their level. Like we say, the spectrum is its own world. And therefore, the only way you can learn about autism is to get into the world. The second thing is that we have, as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we have been pushing for awareness creation and engagement with communities and organizations of persons with disabilities, specifically neurodivergent-led communities and organizations. So for instance, we work very closely with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities to raise awareness on issues of autism, how it can present itself, how it can be diagnosed, and what kind of supports the person can receive. And third and most important is, again, getting peer-to-peer support networks, particularly of caregivers and those of self-advocates with autism. So a lot of autism, remember, is a condition that was just diagnosed very recently in the 1970s. And back then, even in 1970, it was identified as a condition that affected boys because of bad parenting from mothers. Again, the gender conversation always comes through. They say that a bad child belongs to the mother. And therefore, for this reason, there's still very little information and very little knowledge about autism generally. And that's why the caregivers, therefore, become the best source of information. Peer-to-peer support groups of caregivers, peer-to-peer support groups of self-advocates are the best places to learn about autism and what it looks like.
That is a very bright and brilliant experience. I'm very motivated to interact with this so that we can continue spreading and learning and understanding about autism. Now, for the last time, I can give you short time because for this April, it's Autism Awareness Month. I want you to look at the camera and take your short time and encourage the society, the community, and the world at large on how best to understand the autism and what we can encourage other people with disability to mainstream and integrate in the disability spectrum.
So this is what I'd say with regards to autism. The first rule is, remember, I am a person first. Just because invisible disabilities cannot be seen, it doesn't mean that the disability doesn't exist. And some of the most brilliant human beings in the world are actually members of the autistic community. I'd love to give an example of Temple Grandin, who was one of the biggest motivators on understanding vet medicine and veterinary services and how particularly to provide services within the animal husbandry history. Autistic people are sharp and beautiful souls. It's just a sensory processing condition. And therefore, the best way to support an autistic person is see them for the person they are first. Our world is beautiful. One of our symbols is always a colorful puzzle piece to show you how colorful our world is. And therefore, see the person, not the condition. That's the best way to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia, for your concern and your input so that we can learn about the autistic world. I, we thank you for you taking the time to come and impact us today. So thank you, viewers, for watching the Beyond Me podcast. We have learned more about the autistic and we'll continue spreading the awareness of people with disability. If you feel you are entertained, you can take a short time to give your feedback your comment, and also you can like, so that you can help us to grow and make more content moving forward. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.